Do you remember the sculpture Ishkar did called Mindfuck?
So is that the one where his head is
in the ground?
In the ground, not that one.
It was the one where he tore my other brother's textbooks up.
Okay, so it's the figure. Okay.
Covered in.
Shall I talk about that work?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I think for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to take a step back and try and remember some of Ishkar's earlier work. Because I think, when he was in first year, and I can't remember his first year work all that clearly, but I remember when he got into I think it's the end of second year and into third year, we were starting to work more independently. He shared a studio with one or two other students, and he started to make these really, really striking works. And I can visualize them. I think they were combinations of, again, I might be wrong, but I remember them as combinations of painting and collage.
Yes. We have a few of them, not all of them.
And these works did what I was talking about earlier on. They stopped me. Okay. They compelled me to be with them, to stay with them, to experience them, to think about the decisions that have been made, to think about the ways in which certain things were juxtaposed. I think that when his brother died, obviously it was a deeply traumatic time for everyone in the family. Deeply, deeply so. And I think at that time, I think this was in Ishkar's third year, I can't remember if I was supervising his fine arts practice at that time. But I remember him talking me through what had happened. And he did it with such care. Obviously it was so painful for him to do. But he took me through it as a way of trying to allow me to understand where he was. And I think you're right, his work shifted when he started making work again, because I think there's a time where it was really difficult for him to make work. But as I recall, he then started to, he made that piece, the Mindfuck piece, and I think the first time I saw it was when he was kind of working through the ideas and it was in the studio. But then he made the decision to show it in the Wits concourse. Did you see it there?
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, it was just the most powerful experience. So that mound of paper referencing textbooks, notes, being in a tertiary institution, and then the limbs emerging from that mound of paper. That's how I remember it. Do you remember it like that? It's probably one of the most powerful, I was going to say student works, but it's certainly the most powerful student work that I've experienced. But, you know, I think even at that stage, he was working way beyond being a student doing a fine arts degree. He was an artist. And I think that's one of the reasons why his work started to attract the attention of curators, even while he was at Wits in the fine arts department doing his degree. You know, I don't think that it's any coincidence that one of the great contemporary curators who was lecturing at Wits at that time, Gabi Noble. I don't know if you remember her.
The name sounds very familiar.
Yeah. So I think Gabi and other colleagues, but Gabi because she was at that point really starting to break onto the international curating circuit. She recognized how remarkable Ishkar's work was and started to include his work in her curatorial projects. But going back to the Mindfuck work exhibited in the Wits concourse, it was powerful in a studio setting, but in the concourse setting, and for those of you who haven't been into the Wits concourse, it's this kind of large, it's not a cavernous space, but it's surrounded by these floors, balconies, look down into it. It's where many important meetings have taken place during Witz's history. And this piece was there on the floor, and I think there's something about it being floor bound that was so important. We went into the space to assess it, and you know, it's one of those works that's probably beyond assessment. But what was also very striking is that because it was in such a public space, it meant that it wasn't just a fine arts audience that saw it. It was seen by hundreds of students, academic staff, support staff, administrative staff. And it had a striking effect on them. It was a deeply moving work, a very powerful statement about the institution, about being in the institution, about life, about death. And I think for someone to make a work like that takes enormous courage, because you you saying I'm going to be face to face with something that is deeply, deeply painful, devastating. So, yeah, I mean, thinking about the hundreds of students that I've worked with and the work that stands out, that's the work that does it. And then there's I don't know if you remember the work with the figure sitting, kind of looking into this red. Oh, yes. And that's work had a similar power. Really
I couldn't look at it for many years. In fact, I've taken it off that wall a couple of times because it takes me to a very dark place sometimes.
I can understand that.
But I get it.
Yeah. I think Ishkar got to, at this phase, in this phase of his artistic career, he was not afraid to deal with I suppose it's like an internal world that I think most of us don't even enter into.
No.
And he confronted it. And I think he did that, to make a work like Mindfuck. And, it existed on so many different levels. But, part of it was, for me, was about an artist processing something. To have I suppose on one level it's like an intellectual precision to be able to think through the material form of it, but also a level of emotional courage that I think is very rare.